Hello everyone, Officer Dan back with a bit of a different install today as I'm over at 1010's Motorsports with Scotty, Shay, and Wade getting in some lift time for my 2001 Lexus IS300 that we will be driving on Drift Week 4. So huge thanks to 1010's for letting me keep my car here for an ungodly amount of time longer than we needed to, because filming. Easy Knuckles reached out to me and asked if I wanted to get a real angle kit on my hands for the IAS, this one being their 4th version of his angle kit. I was on basic cut and welded knucks for all of Drift Week 2 and the following season plus no coast, and I always felt like the car was lacking in angle and overall feel. Hopefully this kit will change all of those things about this extra radical chassis. This is the kit that I got in the mail. You get almost everything you need to complete the install. The only things missing are going to be the orange Loctite that Easy Knuckles recommends for every single bolt that goes on the kit, as well as a set of ball joints if you're not using your stock Johnnies. Most guys will be able to use said stock knuckles, they just need to cut the ends off of them and put them on the car, but since we wanted ready to go spares, I kept the old ones on and decided to buy new ball joints from AutoZone. And that leads me to step 1 of not starting off on the wrong foot. The only ball joints that will work with this kit are OEM and Moog if you don't want to make mods. The AutoZone ones shown here aren't even close to fitting, and we destroyed one trying to get it to work in the name of science. Post hammer smashing, press pressing, and lots of angle grinding, it would work in a pinch, but it's for sure not optimal in any way, shape, or form. The second ones we ordered were the 555 brand, and these were much closer, but still needed some trimming to fit. I couldn't get the Moog or OEM replacements in time, so we had to go with the 555s. Okay, so now that you've ordered the correct ball joint, all you'll need to do is cut off the longer arm on each one. Keep in mind I'm only doing the install on one side, but rinse, wash, and repeat for the other. Once the arm is cut, smooth out the edges so you don't accidentally emo your wrists while installing this kit. Make them nice and smooth. These things should sit nice and flush post trimming, and if using OEM or Moog, you won't have to do any mods at all. Otherwise, you will have to grind down quite a bit of material off the bottom of the ball joint. The next step is to grab a knuckle and the correct outer tie rod, the one with the bend facing the rear of the car, and install that to the knuckle first. Reason being is you cannot get a socket in the hole once it's installed to the car. So get the nut threaded down, then slap the knuckle into a vise and torque to the specs shown on the screen, which in this case is 40 foot-pounds. By the way, here's an exploded view of all of the torque specs, so you can pause and zoom around if you need to for later. Now, because this is a locking nut, we don't need to apply the orange thread locker, but for all of the rest of the nuts and bolts that don't have built-in thread lock, you will use it on every single one. Now, for my particular install, and because we had so little clearance for the 555 ball joint, we also had to shave down the head of the hex head bolt to sit flush with the body. Again, this wouldn't be an issue with Moog or OEM. Next, grab your orange Loctite that I've been mentioning and apply it to the 2 shorter Allen head bolts that hold the knuckle to the spindle. Get them both tightened down by whatever means you feel like using, then grab a semi-strong friend and have them grab the rotor to brace whilst you torque each bolt down to 83 foot-pounds. Once those are torqued, grab the longer Allen head bolts and apply the orange thread locker to them as well. Pop on the ball joint, then tighten those down and grab that ever helpful friend again and torque both of them down to 83 foot-pounds. You can tell your semi-strong friend to relax for now and grab the rack relocator and get the bolt, then apply some more orange Loctite to it. Don't worry, both of these are the same, so as long as the nub points towards the front of the car, you can't install them wrong. Pop the bolt in, tighten, then support the rack with a wrench and torque down to 76 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install the Lca and Caster Arm. We did this by loosely assembling the entire thing on the bench, then we tossed it on the car, giving it a couple of light love taps to line up the holes for the camber eccentric bolt, all whilst having the caster arm lined up as well. Once in place, toss the eccentric bolt through, give it some more love taps if need be, then toss the nut loosely on the other side to hold it all in place. Now grab the whole knuckle assembly and line up the ball joint with the Lca and pop it on through. You can also loosely install the castle nut for now. Once that's seated, let's work on the caster to Lca connection. This is crucial as these things do need to be to the correct torque spec and have that orange thread locker on, so let's get that done. The way we did this was by tightening them both down while installed, then loosening one at a time and applying the Loctite to them. Then we reinstalled by tightening them both down and then torquing to spec, which for these is a whopping 181 foot-pounds. Yes, you finally get to use that $1,000 torque wrench you've been making payments on for the last 6 years. Now grab the baby torque wrench and torque the ball joint castle nut down to 91 foot-pounds. Just make sure to line the hole up for the cotter pin for later on. I'm leaving it off for now just in case we have to make any further adjustments. Next, you need to remove the strut bracket from the old Lca. It's held on by a 12mm bolt up top and the sway bar end link if you had one, which I did not. Once that's free, you can bring it up to the car and install it to the Easy Knuckles Lca. Grab that orange niceness and apply it to the 12mm bolt that goes up top, and then install those loose for now. Pop in the fresh new sway bar end link that's provided in the kit and the locking nut to the back of it. Tighten that down, then torque it to 70 foot-pounds. Head up top and torque that small 12mm to 18 foot-pounds as well. Bring that handy friend back over and have them wrangle the whole assembly up to line the coilover bracket with the coilover itself. Once it's aligned, toss the bolt in and give it a few love taps if need be, and then you guessed it, more orange Loctite. Toss the nut on and then torque down to 47 foot-pounds. Now, head to the eccentric bolt. Orange Loctite it, then tighten and torque to 136 foot-pounds. We left ours centered in case we needed to adjust camber later on easily. Now you don't have to do this next step if you're bringing the car to an alignment place, but for the sake of science we did. For our particular setup, the rack was centered at 4 3/16 inches, sticking out on each side. That's measuring from the end of the extender to where the rack actually starts. This is important for the video as we needed to cut the inner tie rod to have the max threads engaged, while still allowing us to make adjustments to tow. We did this by threading the inner all the way down and measuring and then making the mark where the threads stop on the outer. Once we had that, we lined them up and removed a 1/4 inch as our cut line. This gives us a ton of thread engaged and still allows 1/4 inch of tow out if needed. We once again fired up the old bandsaw and got to cutting. Once cut, we made sure to clean up the ends and make sure that the nut goes on and off easily. Grab that trusty orange glue and apply to the end of the inner. Make sure you grab the silver washers that came with the kit as well and install them to the end going into the rack. Thread the inner into the rack, then grab some wrenches and torque the entire thing down to that same 76 foot-pounds. Now, if you want to use the sweet-as purple dust boots for the rack, now is the time to do so. Cut them to the appropriate diameter and slip it over the inner tie rod, just like you learned in that awkward AF high school class. Once on, use a zip tie or do it correctly with some twisted wires. You don't want this side to pull off, or what you just did was pointless. Next up is the arduous task of threading the inner into the outer. It's going to take a while. Just eyeball the toe straightness for now, just to get things lined up. Now, before you bolt everything up and put it all back to how it was, now's a good time to remove the large plastic bits that I don't have, but are normally located around this area. You'll also need to pound the pinch weld flats here as well with the BFH. Insert gratuitous footage of me slapping the crap out of it. Now, once that's flat, head over and pop in the cotter pin to the ball joint at the bottom and spread them ears out and around the castle nut. It's always a good idea to mark off any of the nuts and bolts that you've actually torqued so you don't forget anything as you go. Now is also the time to loosely set the camber. If you have a camber gauge, this will drastically help you for later on, as it is a pain to do this on the alignment rack. Having the extended Lcas will drastically change this. It raised ours from 4 degrees to close to 8. So just keep that in mind. Lastly, grab that orange good and apply it to the brace/caster arm bolt and thread it in and tighten that down, and finally torque that thing down to 88 foot-pounds. The rest of the smaller brace bolts should all be torqued to 43 foot-pounds respectively. Now, if you're like me and the stock dust shields are still on the car, you're going to need to cut these or they will hit your sweet new sway bar and links. Make a mark and cut them on off. Clean up those edges with a grinder and make your final guesstimates on what your caster needs to be. A good guess to get it positive enough is to have 2 to 3 fingers from fender to tire. Once you're close, tighten the locking nuts down and then go get an alignment. I cannot stress that part enough. The recommended specs for this setup are 1/4 inch of total toe out for drift, 0 for daily driving, with 6 to 8 degrees of negative camber and around 8 degrees of positive caster. Enjoy the new setup and go shred even harder with your best buds. This has been Officer Dan, Shay Wade, and Scotty Don't with another how-to. Peace.